The hum of the Odyssey's engines filled the ship as it continued its journey through the vast emptiness of space. The crew tried to settle into a routine, but the events aboard the Eclipse lingered in their minds like an unshakable shadow. Sleep was elusive for most of them, and even when they managed to rest, their dreams were plagued by fragmented images of glowing symbols, desiccated corpses, and whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Karen spent most of her time in the lab, poring over the data she had collected. Her obsession with decoding the symbols and logs bordered on manic, but no one blamed her. If anyone could find answers, it was her. She worked tirelessly, fueled by coffee and sheer determination. Yet, the deeper she delved into the information, the more unsettling the patterns became. These coordinates, Karen muttered to herself, staring at the star chart displayed on her screen. They don't match any known systems, not even remotely close. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. The numbers didn't make sense. They pointed to a region of space so far beyond human exploration that it might as well have been another galaxy. But if the entity, or whatever it was, had originated there, then what did that mean? Had the crew of the Eclipse unknowingly opened a door to this distant, unknown place? And if so, how? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. It was Daniel, his face lined with fatigue. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his eyes scanning the cluttered workbench before settling on Karen. "Any progress?" he asked, his tone neutral but tinged with urgency. "Some," Karen replied, gesturing to the screen. "I've narrowed down the coordinates mentioned in the logs. They lead to a sector we've never mapped. No stars, no planets, nothing, just empty space." Daniel frowned, crossing his arms. Empty space doesn't usually produce entities that feed on fear. "No, it doesn't," Karen agreed. "Which is why I think these coordinates are either incomplete or symbolic. Maybe they're pointing to something else entirely. A signal, a frequency, or even a dimension." "A dimension," Daniel repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You really think we're dealing with something that advanced?" "I don't know what to think anymore," Karen admitted. "But whatever it is, it's not natural, and it's smarter than we are." Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Keep working on it. In the meantime, I want you to prioritize analyzing those samples you brought back. If there's anything physical left behind by the entity, we need to understand it." Karen nodded, though doubt flickered in her eyes. "Understood. But Captain, what if we can't stop it? What if it's already aboard the Odyssey?" The question hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Daniel hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Then we'll deal with it. We always do." Elsewhere on the ship, Laura wandered the corridors. During her off hours, unable to relax, her rifle felt heavier than usual, strapped across her back, and every shadow seemed to stretch longer than it should. She told herself it was just paranoia, but deep down, she knew better. Something about the Eclipse had changed, her end, not for the better. As she passed the galley, she spotted Ryan sitting alone at a table, staring blankly at a cup of coffee. His toolkit lay forgotten beside him, its contents scattered haphazardly. Laura hesitated before stepping inside, unsure if he wanted company, but curiosity got the better of her. "You okay?" she asked, sliding into the seat across from him. Ryan glanced up, startled. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" "The symbols," he said after a moment. "Those damn glowing things. They were everywhere on that ship. Everywhere. And now, I keep seeing them." Laura frowned. "Seeing them where?" "In my head," Ryan admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "When I close my eyes, they're there, pulsing, moving, like they're alive." Laura shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. She had experienced similar sensations since leaving the Eclipse, but she hadn't wanted to admit it. Hearing Ryan say it out loud made it feel real and terrifying. "Do you think it's messing with us?" she asked cautiously. Ryan shrugged, avoiding her gaze. Maybe. Or maybe we're just losing our minds. Either way, it doesn't matter. Once it gets inside your head, it doesn't leave. Laura opened her mouth to reply, but the ship's intercom crackled to life, cutting her off. Matt's voice came through, strained and urgent. Captain Hayes, report to the bridge immediately. We've got a problem. Daniel arrived on the bridge moments later, his expression grim. Matt stood at the main console, his fingers flying across the controls as alarms blared softly in the background. The view screen displayed a swirling, massive static, blotting out the stars beyond. What's going on? Daniel demanded. It's the sensors, Matt explained, his voice tight with tension. Something's interfering with them. I thought it was just residual energy from the eclipse, but it's getting worse. How much worse? Daniel asked. Matt hesitated, glancing at the captain. Bad enough that we might lose navigation. Systems entirely. If that happens, we won't be able to reach the relay station or anywhere else. Daniel clenched his jaw, his mind racing. Isolate the affected systems. Divert power from non-essential functions if you have to. We can't afford to lose control of the ship. I'm trying, Matt replied, frustration creeping into his tone. But whatever's causing this isn't responding to standard protocols. It's almost like it's learning. The words sent a chill through the room. Learning implied intelligence and intent. Daniel turned to the view screen, studying the static-filled image. For a brief moment, he thought he saw something moving within the chaos. A shape, faint and indistinct, but unmistakably there. Carter, he said sharply, zoom in on that section. Matt adjusted the camera feed, focusing on the area Daniel had indicated. At first, nothing appeared, but then, slowly, a pattern emerged. Glowing lines, pulsing rhythmically, began to form shapes that looked eerily familiar. Oh no, Matt whispered, his voice trembling. Those are the symbols. Daniel stared at the screen, his heart pounding. The symbols were spreading, multiplying, filling the view screen until it was impossible to look away. They pulsed in sync with the ship's alarms, each beat resonating, like a heartbeat. It's here, Daniel said quietly, his voice hollow. It followed us. Before anyone could respond, the lights throughout the ship flickered violently, plunging the bridge into near darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting the room in a dim red glow. The alarms grew louder, overlapping with a low guttural groan that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Shut it down, Daniel shouted, turning to Matt. Cut all power if you have to. I'm trying, Matt yelled back, his hands shaking as he worked the controls. It's not responding. The groaning intensified, accompanied by the sound of metal twisting and tearing. Sparks flew from exposed panels, and the floor vibrated beneath their feet. Whatever was happening, it was taking hold of the ship and fast. In the lab, Karen heard the commotion and rushed to the door. When she opened it, she found the corridor bathed in red light, the air thick with smoke. Crew members ran past her, shouting orders and warnings. Panic surged within her, but she forced herself to stay calm. Karen, Laura called out, appearing at the end of the hall. We need to get to the bridge. What's happening? Karen asked, falling into step beside her. I don't know, Laura admitted, gripping her rifle tightly. But it's bad. They reached the bridge together, finding Daniel and Matt struggling to regain control of the ship. The glowing symbols now covered the view screen entirely, pulsing faster and brighter with each passing second. The groaning had morphed into a deafening roar, shaking the entire vessel. It's feeding, Karen realized aloud, her voice barely audible over the noise. It's using the ship's energy to grow stronger. Then we need to cut it off, Daniel said firmly. Blake, Carter, find a way to sever its connection. Now, Karen and Matt exchanged a glance before diving into the task. Working side by side, they rerouted power grids, disabled auxiliary systems, and attempted to isolate the affected areas. Sweat dripped down their faces as they worked, the ship bucking and shuddering around them. Finally, after what felt like hours, the roaring subsided. The symbols faded from the view screen, replaced by the cold, silent void of space. The ship stabilized, though the damage was evident. Panels sparked, lights flickered, and several systems remained offline. Breathing heavily, Daniel turned to Karen. "Did we stop it?" "For now," Karen replied, her voice shaky. "But it's still here. Somewhere. We just bought ourselves some time." Daniel nodded, his expression grim. "Then, let's use it wisely. We need to figure out how to fight this thing, and fast." As the crew regrouped, the weight of their situation settled over them like a suffocating blanket. The entity had followed them aboard the Odyssey, and it wasn't done yet. Whatever it wanted, it would stop at nothing to get it. And unless they found a way to stop it first, none of them would survive. The shuttle docked with the Odyssey, and as soon as the airlock hissed open, the team stumbled out, their faces pale and drawn. The journey back felt like an eternity, each of them carrying the weight of what they had seen aboard the Eclipse. Matt Carter greeted them in the docking bay, his expression a mix of relief and concern. "You're all okay," he said, though it sounded more like a question than a statement. "For now," Daniel replied grimly, pulling off his helmet. His dark hair was damp with sweat, and his eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. "But we need to get this ship moving. We don't know how long that thing will stay quiet." "Thing?" Matt asked, his voice rising slightly. "What, exactly, happened down there?" "It's complicated," Karen interjected before Daniel could answer. She set her pack on the floor and began rummaging through it, pulling out the samples and data she had collected. "We'll explain everything once we're underway. Right now, I need to start analyzing this stuff." Daniel nodded in agreement. "Carter, prep the engines. Get us out of here as fast as possible. Bennett, sweep the area for any anomalies. Miller, check the shuttle for damage. We can't afford any surprises." The crew dispersed quickly, each member focused on their tasks. Laura headed toward the sensors, her movements sharp and efficient despite the exhaustion etched on her face. Ryan lingered near the shuttle, muttering under his breath about the glowing symbols and the strange energy surges they had encountered. Matt rushed to the bridge, his fingers flying over the controls as he initiated the departure sequence. Karen retreated to the lab, shutting herself away from the rest of the crew. She spread the items she had gathered across the workbench: photographs of the symbols, fragments of corrupted logs, and small vials containing traces of residue scraped from the cryopod. Her hands trembled as she powered up the diagnostic equipment, but she forced herself to focus. Whatever answers lay hidden in these artifacts, she needed to uncover them before it was too late. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Daniel paced back and forth, staring at the view screen as the Odyssey pulled away from the derelict warship. The Eclipse grew smaller and smaller, its battered silhouette fading into the vast expanse of space. But even as the distance between them widened, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't truly escaped. Something about the ship and whatever lurked inside, it felt unfinished. "Captain," Matt called out, breaking the silence. "We're clear. No signs of pursuit or unusual activity. Where do you want to go?" "Away," Daniel said firmly. "Set a course for the nearest relay station. We'll report our findings and request backup if necessary." Matt hesitated, glancing at the captain. "Backup? You think we're going to need reinforcements?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted, "but I'd rather be safe than sorry. Whatever we dealt with on that ship wasn't natural. If it decides to follow us—" He didn't finish the sentence, but Matt understood. The younger man nodded and turned back to the controls, plotting the course with practiced precision. As the Odyssey entered warp speed, leaving the Eclipse far behind, the tension on the bridge eased slightly, but only slightly. Back in the lab, Karen worked tirelessly, her mind racing as she pieced together the fragmented information. The symbols, she realized, weren't just random markings. They formed patterns that repeated throughout the ship. Some resembled ancient human languages, while others bore no resemblance to anything she had ever seen. It was as if two different systems, one human, one alien, had merged into something entirely new. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered, leaning closer to the screen displaying the translated fragments. How could humans create something like this? Or did they find it? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Laura stepped inside, her rifle slung over her shoulder. "Everything okay in here?" "As okay as it can be," Karen replied, gesturing to the cluttered workbench. "I'm trying to figure out what those symbols mean. There's some kind of language, but it's unlike anything I've studied before." Laura frowned, crossing her arms. "Do you think it has something to do with whatever killed the crew?" "Maybe," Karen said slowly. "According to the logs, the entity or whatever it is feeds on fear. These symbols might be part of how it communicates. Or maybe they're a warning." "A warning to who?" Laura asked, her tone skeptical. "Us, or the people who woke it up?" "Both, probably," Karen admitted. "If the crew experimented with dark matter propulsion, they may have accidentally opened the doorway to somewhere else, somewhere dangerous." Laura shuddered visibly. "You really believe that? That they summoned something from another dimension?" "I don't know what to believe anymore," Karen confessed. "But I do know one thing. Whatever it is, it's still alive. And it's not done with us." As if on cue, the lights in the lab flickered briefly, casting the room in shadow. Laura instinctively reached for her rifle, but the power stabilized after a few seconds. Karen stared at the ceiling, her heart pounding. That shouldn't have happened. "The ship's systems are fine. Are you sure?" Laura asked, her voice tense. "Could it have followed us?" Karen shook her head, though uncertainty clouded her features. "I don't see how. Unless—" She trailed off, unwilling to voice her fears aloud. Instead, she returned to her work, poring over the data with renewed determination. Every second counted now. If the entity had indeed hitched a ride aboard the Odyssey, they needed to prepare. Elsewhere on the ship, Ryan joined Daniel on the bridge, his expression troubled. "Captain, I've been thinking. Those symbols, they reacted when we touched them. What if they're not just communication tools? What if they're traps?" "Traps?" Daniel echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah," Ryan continued. "Like maybe touching them activates something, or lets something in. Remember how the ship started coming online after Blake messed with the console in the engine room?" Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "It's possible. But if that's true, then why hasn't it attacked us yet? We're vulnerable right now. It would have made sense for it to strike while we were still recovering." Ryan hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "Unless it's waiting for something. Maybe it needs time to adapt to being aboard a new ship. Or maybe it's feeding off our fear first." The idea sent a chill down Daniel's spine. He glanced at the view screen, half expecting to see the eclipse looming behind them. But the stars stretched endlessly ahead, unbroken by any sign of pursuit. "Keep monitoring the ship's systems," Daniel instructed, "and alert me immediately if anything unusual happens. In the meantime, we stick to the plan. Relay station first, then reinforcements." Ryan nodded and left the bridge, leaving Daniel alone with his thoughts. He sank into the captain's chair, staring at the endless void beyond the viewport. Despite their escape, the eclipse loomed large in his mind, its secrets and horrors, refusing to let him go. Hours passed, and the Odyssey traveled deeper into space, putting more distance between itself and the derelict warship. The crew settled into a tense routine, each member acutely aware of the potential threat lurking unseen. Karen remained in the lab, her progress slow but steady. She managed to partially decode one of the symbols, revealing a phrase that sent chills down her spine. "Feed the void." What does that even mean? She whispered to herself, jotting down notes furiously. Is it literal, metaphorical, a command? Her questions went unanswered, but the implications were clear. Whatever they had encountered aboard the Eclipse was tied to the concept of consumption of fear, of life, of sanity, and it wanted more. By the end of her shift, Karen was exhausted, but she refused to stop working. She knew they were running out of time. As she reviewed the corrupted logs for the 100th time, a sudden realization struck her. One of the fragmented messages mentioned coordinates a location deep within uncharted space. Captain, she said urgently over the comm system. I think I know where it came from. Daniel's voice crackled through the speakers. Where? The entity, Karen explained. The logs mention coordinates. If we cross-reference them with known star charts, we might be able to pinpoint its origin. Good work, Blake, Daniel replied. Send me the data. We'll analyze it further. As Karen transmitted the information, she couldn't help but wonder if finding the entity's origin would bring them closer to understanding or unleash something far worse. Either way, the journey ahead promised to be anything but safe. Later that evening, the crew gathered in the mess hall for a rare moment of downtime. Exhaustion hung heavy in the air, but no one spoke much. Each of them replayed the events aboard the Eclipse in their minds, searching for answers that remained just out of reach. Laura broke the silence first, her voice low. Do you think we'll ever feel safe again? Daniel looked at her, his expression unreadable. Probably not, but that's the job. We go where others won't. We face the unknown, even when it scares us. And sometimes, Ryan added, bitterly, we stumble into things we can't fight. No one said this would be easy, Daniel countered, his tone firm. But we made it this far. That counts for something. The conversation ended there, leaving the crew to their thoughts. Outside the windows, the stars burned brightly, indifferent to the struggles of the tiny vessel passing through their domain. For now, the Odyssey was safe. But the memory of the eclipse lingered like a shadow, a reminder of the dangers that awaited humanity in the depths of space. The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly in every direction, a canvas of black dotted with distant stars. Against this infinite backdrop floated the Odyssey, a sleek exploration vessel designed for long journeys into uncharted territories. Its crew of 12 had been traveling for months, tasked with mapping new regions of space and investigating any anomalies they encountered. It was lonely work, but it came with the thrill of discovery. This time, however, their mission took an unsettling turn. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared at the view screen. The image displayed before him wasn't another barren asteroid field or swirling nebula. It was something far more intriguing and, potentially, far more dangerous. A derelict human warship drifted silently ahead, its battered hull reflecting faint light from a nearby star. The ship looked ancient, its surface scarred by micrometeorite impacts and years of exposure to the harsh conditions of deep space. Lieutenant Blake, Daniel said without taking his eyes off the screen, "Can we confirm what we're looking at?" Karen Blake, the communications officer, sat hunched over her console, her fingers flying across the controls. She adjusted her headset slightly, listening intently to the faint signals coming from the mysterious vessel. Her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's definitely human," she replied after a moment. "Based on the design and markings, I'd say it's the Eclipse. But that doesn't make sense." Daniel turned to face her now, his expression one of curiosity, mixed with concern. "Why not? The Eclipse went missing over 30 years ago," Karen explained, glancing up briefly before returning her attention to the data streaming across her screen. "It disappeared during the Outer Rim conflicts, presumed destroyed in combat. No wreckage was ever found. If this is really the Eclipse, then how did it end up here, so far from where it was last seen?" Chief Engineer Ryan Miller leaned forward from his station, rubbing the stubble on his chin thoughtfully. Could be a hoax, he suggested. Someone might have salvaged parts of the original ship and rebuilt it. Or maybe it's just some kind of decoy meant to lure us in. Laura Bennett, the security officer, shook her head firmly. No way. Look at the damage patterns on the hull. Those aren't fresh repairs, they're decades old. Whoever or whatever patched this thing together didn't do a great job. She crossed her arms, her tone firm but tinged with unease. This ship has been out here for a long time. Daniel nodded slowly, absorbing their input. He knew better than to jump to conclusions, especially when dealing with unknowns in deep space. Still, there was something about the sight of the eclipse that unsettled him. It wasn't just the fact that it had reappeared after all these years. It was the way it seemed to loom on the view screen, almost taunting them. There was an air of foreboding surrounding it, as if it carried secrets too dark to uncover. "Ensign Carter," Daniel called out, addressing Matt Carter, the youngest member of the crew, who was stationed at the sensors. "What are our readings telling us? Any signs of life aboard?" Matt adjusted his glasses nervously, his fingers tapping rapidly on the keyboard. "Negative, Captain. No life signs detected. But there's something weird going on with the energy signature. It's fluctuating erratically like theirs. Residual power still active somewhere inside the ship." "That doesn't sound good," Ryan muttered under his breath. "If the power systems are unstable, boarding could be risky." "We can't ignore this," Daniel said firmly. "If the eclipse is truly abandoned, it could hold valuable information about what happened during the Outer Rim conflicts. And if it's not..." He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. "We need to know what we're dealing with." After a brief pause, he made his decision. "Blake, you're with me. Miller, Bennett, you're coming too. We'll take a shuttle over and investigate. Carter, you stay here and monitor everything from the Odyssey. If anything happens, you have permission to initiate an emergency. Recall." The team quickly prepared for the mission, donning standard-issue environment suits equipped with oxygen tanks, communication devices, and basic survival gear. As they boarded the shuttle and approached the derelict warship, tension filled the small cabin. None of them spoke much, each lost in their own thoughts. The closer they got to the eclipse, the stronger the feeling of unease became. When the shuttle docked with the larger vessel, the transition was seamless but eerie. The airlock opened with a hiss, revealing a dimly lit corridor beyond. The interior of the eclipse was cold and silent, save for the occasional creak of metal as the ship shifted slightly in the vacuum of space. Dust coated every surface, and the faint smell of decay lingered despite the lack of atmosphere. It was clear that no one had set foot here in decades. As they stepped inside, Laura activated the flashlight mounted on her rifle, sweeping the beam across the walls. The paint was peeling, and rust had begun to eat away at the metal in places. Scorch marks marred the floor, evidence of battles fought long ago. But there were other signs, two signs, that suggested the crew hadn't simply evacuated or died in battle. Strange symbols had been carved into the walls, glowing faintly in the darkness. They looked almost organic, pulsing with a soft, sickly green light. "What the hell is this?" Ryan whispered, running his gloved hand over one of the symbols. It felt warm to the touch, unnaturally so. "I don't know," Daniel admitted, his voice low. "But it's not standard military protocol. Someone or something did this after the crew was gone." Karen knelt beside a nearby console, examining it closely. Most of the controls were dead, but a few lights blinked sporadically, indicating residual power. She plugged a handheld diagnostic tool into the system, hoping to retrieve any remaining data. After a few moments, the device beeped softly, signaling a partial success. "I'm getting fragments of logs," she announced, her voice trembling slightly. "They're heavily corrupted, but I think I can piece some of them together." "Do it," Daniel ordered. "We need answers." As Karen worked, the others fanned out to explore the immediate area. Laura kept her rifle raised, scanning the shadows cautiously. Every step echoed loudly in the silence, making even the smallest sounds seem ominous. Ryan examined the walls and floors, searching for clues about the ship's condition. Daniel stayed close to Karen, offering support as she sifted through the fragmented recordings. "This isn't right," Karen murmured, her eyes widening as she listened to the garbled audio. "These logs, they're talking about experiments. Something about using dark matter propulsion to achieve faster-than-light travel. But then things started going wrong." "How wrong?" Daniel asked, leaning closer. "Very wrong," Karen replied grimly. "Listen to this." She played a snippet of distorted audio. Through the static, they could hear a man's voice, strained and panicked. "The calculations were off. Shouldn't have done it. It's awake." The recording cut off abruptly, leaving only silence. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of the words hung heavy in the air, raising questions none of them wanted to answer. "What do you think he meant?" Ryan finally asked, breaking the tension. "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "But whatever it is, it can't be good. Let's keep moving. We need to find more information before we jump to conclusions." With that, the team pressed onward, venturing deeper into the bowels of the eclipse. Each step brought them closer to the truth, but also closer to whatever horrors awaited them within the derelict ship. The deeper the team ventured into the eclipse, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air inside their suits felt heavier, and the silence seemed to press against them like a physical force. Every step echoed unnaturally loud, bouncing off the corroded walls and creating an unsettling cacophony. The faint green glow of the strange symbols etched into the metal followed them, as if they were being watched or led by something unseen. Karen adjusted her grip on the diagnostic tool as she walked, her mind racing with the fragmented pieces of information she had managed to salvage from the corrupted logs. She replayed the panicked voice in her head, trying to make sense of its warning. "It's awake," he had said. What exactly was it, and what did it mean for them? "Captain," Karen called out softly, keeping her voice low. "I think we should prioritize finding the bridge. If there's any useful data left, it'll be there." Daniel nodded, his helmet light cutting through the gloom ahead. "Agreed. Let's keep moving forward. Stay alert, everyone. This place is giving me the creeps." Laura shot him a sharp look over her shoulder. "Don't say stuff like that, you'll jinx us." "I'm just saying what we're all thinking," Ryan replied defensively. But he didn't argue further. Instead, he focused on examining the walls, running his gloved fingers along the glowing symbols. They pulsed faintly under his touch, almost as if responding to his presence. He pulled his hand back quickly, muttering under his breath, "Yeah, this is definitely not normal." The group moved cautiously down the corridor, their footsteps muffled by layers of dust and debris. The path forked ahead, leading to two separate routes. One hallway sloped downward, likely toward engineering or the lower decks, while the other stretched straight ahead, marked by a faded sign reading bridge. Without hesitation, Daniel gestured for the team to follow the latter. As they approached the bridge, the condition of the ship grew worse. Panels hung loose from the ceiling. Wires dangled precariously, and sections of the floor were buckled and warped. It looked less like a derelict warship and more like the aftermath of some catastrophic event. Laura kept her rifle trained on every shadow, her movements tense and deliberate. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, even though nothing moved except the flickering lights overhead. When they finally reached the bridge, the sight stopped them in their tracks. The room was in complete disarray. Consoles were smashed beyond recognition, chairs were overturned, and shards of glass littered the floor. Bloodstains smeared across the walls, dark and dried, forming patterns that looked almost deliberate. In the center of the chaos, someone had scrawled words in glowing paint. The same eerie green hue as the symbols outside. Karen stepped closer, shining her flashlight on the message. Her breath caught in her throat as she read it aloud. "Don't let them wake." "What does that even mean?" Ryan asked, his voice tight with unease. "Who are they?" "No idea," Daniel said grimly, his gaze sweeping the room. "But I don't think we're going to like the answer." Karen knelt beside one of the damaged consoles, hoping to recover more data. After a few moments of fiddling with the diagnostic tool, she let out a frustrated sigh. "This system is completely fried. Whoever wrecked this place didn't want anyone finding out what happened here. Or maybe they were trying to stop something," Laura suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something bad enough to destroy their own ship, rather than risk letting it escape." The thought sent a chill through the group. They exchanged uneasy glances, each silently wondering if turning back was still an option. But before anyone could suggest it, Karen spoke up again. "Wait, I found something." She tapped furiously at the device, her expression shifting from frustration to alarm. "There's a partial log here. It's heavily degraded, but I can play it." She pressed a button, and static crackled through. "There comes." Then a voice emerged, calm at first, but growing increasingly frantic as the recording progressed. "This is Commander Stephen Cole, captain of the Eclipse. We made a mistake. A terrible mistake. Our experiments with dark matter propulsion. They opened a door we shouldn't have touched. Something came through. At first, we thought it was harmless, a glitch in the systems, maybe radiation poisoning, but then the crew started changing. Their minds unraveled. They started seeing things, hearing things." The recording paused, filled with bursts of interference. When the voice returned, it was trembling with fear. "It's feeding on us. Not our bodies, but our minds, our fears. It amplifies them until we can't tell what's real anymore." Some of the crew locked themselves in cryopods, hoping to escape. Others didn't make it that far. For those who remain, there's only madness. Another pause, longer this time. When the voice came back, it was barely audible, choked with desperation. "If anyone finds this, don't let them wake." The recording ended abruptly, leaving the team in stunned silence. Karen lowered the diagnostic tool, her hands shaking slightly. "That's all there is," she said quietly. "No explanation of what it is, just that." "Well, that clears everything up," Ryan muttered sarcastically, though his tone betrayed his growing anxiety. "What do we do now? Poke around until whatever ITs decides to show itself?" "We stick to the plan," Daniel said firmly, though even he sounded less confident than before. "We gather as much intel as we can, and get out of here. Whatever happened on this ship, it's ancient history. As long as we stay focused and don't touch anything suspicious, we'll be fine." His words were meant to reassure the group, but they had the opposite effect. Laura tightened her grip on her rifle, scanning the shadows nervously. "Easy for you to say, Captain. You're not the one standing guard while ghostly voices warn us about waking monsters." "Enough," Daniel snapped, his patience wearing thin. "We're professionals. We've dealt with unknowns before. Let's focus on finishing the job." With that, he turned his attention to the rest of the bridge, searching for anything else that might provide answers. Karen continued working on the console, determined to extract every scrap of data she could. Ryan wandered over to a nearby wall, examining the glowing symbols more closely. He traced one with his finger, frowning as it pulsed brighter under his touch. "These marks, they're not random," he observed. "They form patterns, almost like writing." Karen repeated, looking up from her work. "Alien? Writing. Maybe," Ryan admitted. "Or maybe something older. Something human, but twisted. Whatever it is, it's not natural." Before anyone could respond, a sudden noise shattered the silence, a low guttural groan that reverberated through the ship. The sound was deep and unnatural, like metal grinding against metal, but with an organic quality that made it even more disturbing. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing through the corridors and setting their nerves on edge. What the hell was that? Laura demanded, spinning around to face the source of the sound. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but empty space. Could be structural damage, Ryan offered weakly, though he didn't sound convinced. Old ships like this sometimes creak and groan when they shift. Or it could be something else, Daniel countered, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. Stay sharp, we're not alone here. The groaning faded as quickly as it had begun, leaving behind an oppressive silence. The team exchanged wary glances, their instincts screaming at them to leave. But duty and curiosity kept them rooted to the spot. We need to check the cryo bay, Karen said suddenly, breaking the silence. If some of the crew went into stasis, there might be survivors, or at least bodies we can examine for clues. Daniel hesitated, weighing the risks. The cryo bay was located deeper within the ship, meaning they'd have to traverse more of the derelict vessel to reach it. But Karen was right. If anyone had survived the initial incident, they'd be in stasis. And if no one had, their remains might hold answers. All right, he agreed reluctantly. Let's move. But remember, stay close, stay quiet, and don't touch anything unless absolutely necessary. The team filed out of the bridge, their movements cautious and deliberate. The groaning sound hadn't returned, but the oppressive atmosphere remained, pressing down on them like a weight. As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the eclipse, the glowing symbols continued to guide their way, pulsing faintly in the darkness, as if beckoning them forward. Every step felt heavier than the last, as though the ship itself was resisting their intrusion. Shadows danced at the edges of their vision, vanishing whenever they turned to look. The air grew colder with each passing moment, biting through their suits despite the built-in heating systems. None of them spoke. They didn't need to. The fear was palpable, hanging thick in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the cryo bay. The massive doors slid open with a groan, revealing rows upon rows of cryopods lining the walls. Most of them were cracked open and empty, their occupants long gone. But one pod stood out, a single unit near the back, its glass canopy intact. Inside lay a desiccated corpse, its features frozen in a mask of pure terror. "Oh my God," Karen whispered, her voice trembling. She approached the pod slowly, shining her flashlight on the body. Its skin was gray and brittle, its eyes wide, open and staring blankly into eternity. The team worked quickly in the cryo bay, their movements hurried, but deliberate. Every second spent aboard the Eclipse felt like an eternity, the oppressive weight of the ship pressing down on them more heavily with each passing moment. The desiccated corpse in the pod remained a grim centerpiece, its hollow eyes seeming to follow their every move. Karen snapped photos of the body and the strange symbols etched into the pod's frame, her hands trembling slightly, despite her best efforts to stay calm. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered, glancing at the lifeless figure. If they were trying to survive by going into stasis, why would someone or something break open all these pods? And why is this one still intact? Maybe it was left as a warning, Ryan suggested, his voice low. He stood near the entrance, keeping watch while occasionally casting uneasy glances over his shoulder. Like, this is what happens if you don't get out. Laura shook her head, her rifle trained on the shadows beyond the cryo bay doors. Or maybe whatever did this wanted us to find it. Maybe it's bait. Daniel frowned, his gaze fixed on the glowing symbols around the pod. They pulsed faintly now, almost rhythmically, as though responding to some unseen force. "We're not sticking around long enough to find out. Gather what you can, and let's head back to the shuttle." "This place is giving me a bad feeling," Karen nodded, stuffing her diagnostic tool and samples into her pack. She hesitated for a moment, staring at the corpse one last time before turning away. As much as she wanted answers, the thought of staying here any longer made her stomach churn. The air seemed colder now, biting through her suit, even though the temperature controls were functioning perfectly. It wasn't just physical discomfort, it was psychological, as if the ship itself was feeding off their growing fear as they prepared to leave the cryo bay. A soft noise echoed through the corridor outside. At first, it sounded like footsteps, slow, deliberate, and unnervingly close. But when they turned toward the sound, there was nothing there, just empty space and the flickering glow of the symbols lining the walls. "Did anyone else hear that?" Laura whispered, her finger tightening on the trigger of her rifle. "I heard it," Daniel confirmed, stepping forward cautiously. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing only empty hallways and twisted metal. "Stay alert. We don't know what we're dealing with." Ryan adjusted the strap of his toolkit, his expression tense. "Could be structural damage, again, or, I don't know, ghosts." "No kidding," Ryan shot back. "I'm just saying, we've seen weirder stuff out here. Who knows what kind of technology they were messing with." The group fell silent, their unease palpable. They moved carefully down the corridor, retracing their steps toward the bridge. The journey back felt longer than it should have, the ship stretching endlessly around them like a maze designed to disorient. Shadows danced at the edges of their vision, vanishing whenever they turned to look. The groaning sound from earlier returned, louder this time, reverberating through the walls and making their teeth ache. "We need to hurry," Daniel said firmly, picking up the pace. "Something's not right." Before anyone could respond, Karen stumbled, nearly dropping her pack. She caught herself against the wall, her breath coming in short gasps. "Wait, stop. What is it?" Daniel asked, turning back to face her. "The symbols, they're changing," she said, pointing at the glowing marks on the wall. Sure enough, the patterns had shifted, forming new shapes that seemed almost alive. The green light pulsed faster now, matching the rhythm of their heartbeats. Ryan leaned closer, squinting at the symbols. They weren't like this before. "What does it mean?" "I don't know," Karen admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it feels like the ship is waking up." A sudden burst of static erupted, and there comes, startling them. Matt Carter's voice crackled through the chaos, distorted but urgent. "Captain, you need to get back to the shuttle right now." "Carter, what's going on?" Daniel demanded, raising his voice to be heard over the interference. "I'm picking up energy spikes from the eclipse," Matt replied, his tone frantic. "Massive ones. The ship's power systems are coming online, but it's not stable. If you're not careful, you could get trapped in there." "Understood," Daniel said, already motioning for the team to move faster. "We're heading back now." The urgency in Matt's voice spurred them into action. They sprinted down the corridors, their boots pounding against the metal floors. The groaning grew louder, accompanied by the sound of grinding gears and snapping cables. Lights flickered erratically, casting the halls in alternating bursts of brightness and shadow. The symbols on the walls pulsed wildly, their glow intensifying until it hurt to look directly at them. "We're almost there," Laura shouted, her rifle bouncing against her shoulder as she ran. Her flashlight beam darted ahead, illuminating the path to the airlock where the shuttle waited. But as they rounded the final corner, they skidded to a halt. The airlock doors were sealed shut, their control panels sparking uselessly. Beyond the glass, the shuttle sat untouched, tantalizingly close yet impossibly out of reach. "Damn it," Ryan cursed, slamming his fist against the wall. "How are we supposed to get out now?" Curran rushed to the panel, pulling out her diagnostic tool. Her fingers flew across the screen as she tried to override the system. "It's locked down. Whatever's powering the ship is overriding manual controls. Can you bypass it?" Daniel asked, his voice tight with tension. "I'll try," Karen replied, her brow furrowed in concentration. "But it's going to take time." "We don't have time," Laura snapped, spinning around to scan the corridor behind them. The groaning had morphed into a deafening roar, shaking the entire ship. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the walls began to warp and buckle under the strain. "Captain, I'm detecting movement inside the ship." Matt's voice broke through the cum again, barely audible over the noise. "Something's alive in there with you." Daniel clenched his jaw, his mind racing. "Where's the nearest emergency hatch? We can't wait for Karen to fix this." "There's 2 decks below us," Ryan answered immediately. "But getting there means doubling back through the engine room. That area's unstable, the whole section could collapse." "It's our only option," Daniel decided. "Let's move." The team turned and ran, retracing their steps deeper into the bowels of the eclipse. The ship groaned and shuddered around them, threatening to tear itself apart at any moment. The glowing symbols flared brighter with every step, pulsing in sync with the violent tremors rocking the vessel. It was as if the ship itself was fighting back, resisting their escape. As they neared the engine room, a chilling realization dawned on them. The shadows in the corridors weren't just tricks of the light, they were moving. Twisting and writhing like living things, they slithered along the walls and ceiling, following the team without making a sound. Laura raised her rifle, aiming at one of the shifting forms, but it vanished before she could fire. "Don't waste your ammo," Daniel warned, his voice steady, despite the terror clawing at his chest. "Whatever they are, bullets won't stop them." They pushed forward, ignoring the creeping dread that threatened to overwhelm them. When they finally reached the engine room, the sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and horrifying. Massive turbines hummed with erratic energy, their blades spinning wildly out of control. Sparks flew from exposed wiring, and pools of coolant leaked onto the floor, creating slippery hazards. In the center of the chaos stood another set of glowing symbols, larger and more intricate than any they'd seen before. "These must be controlling the power surge," Karen said, rushing toward them. "If I can disable them, we might be able to stabilize the ship long enough to escape." "And if you can't?" Ryan asked, his voice hollow. "Then we're dead anyway," Karen replied bluntly, already working on the console. "Cover me, Laura," and Daniel positioned themselves on either side of her, weapons drawn and eyes scanning the room. The shadows continued to writhe around them, closing in like predators stalking their prey. Faint whispers filled the air, indistinct but insistent, burrowing into their minds and planting seeds of doubt and fear. "You're doing great, Blake," Daniel encouraged, his voice strained. "Just a little longer." Karen nodded, sweat dripping down her face as she worked frantically. The symbols pulsed faster, reacting to her interference. A sharp jolt of electricity shot through the console, forcing her to pull back with a yelp. Smoke curled from the damaged panel, but she didn't give up. With trembling hands, she read the circuits, bypassing the corrupted systems one by one. Finally, after what felt like hours, the turbines slowed to a halt. The roaring subsided, replaced by an eerie silence. The glowing symbols dimmed, their light fading until they disappeared entirely. For a brief moment, the ship felt still. "It's done," Karen breathed, collapsing to her knees in exhaustion. "We stopped it. For now," Daniel added grimly, helping her to her feet. "Let's get to that hatch before anything else goes wrong." The team hurried toward the emergency exit, their bodies aching and their nerves frayed. When they reached the hatch, Ryan used his toolkit to pry it open, revealing a narrow maintenance tunnel leading upward. One by one, they climbed through, emerging into the docking bay, where the shuttle awaited. As they boarded the shuttle and sealed the hatch behind them, none of them spoke. Their relief was palpable, but so was the